There's a man in Peekaboo, Idaho, who's been a true leader in the ranching and business industry, who also hunted ducks with Ernest Hemingway and is still flying his own airplane at age 94. His name is Bud Purdy. In ranching circles, he's considered an Idaho legend.
Well, see, Bud Purdy is one of my heroes. He just exemplifies what what a lot of us would like to aspire to be.
He always wants to learn. I bet Bud Purdy's been on thousands of range tours. Sits in the front of the bus. A lot of times the first one off the bus wants to, kick the clods, look at the creeks, look at the grass, continually interested in range science and the resources.
Bud Purdy was born in Beatrice, Nebraska. After a divorce, his mother moved her 4 children to Redlands, California, to live with their family. Soon after, her father, W.H. Kilpatrick, sent Bud and his brother Bill to work on the family sheep ranch in Peekaboo in the summer of 1928. The boys were 10 and 11 years old. A family friend, Elmer Cox, drove them to Peekaboo. It took them 4 days to get there.
There wasn't very many paved roads, I'll tell you that.
Bud and Bill got paid 10 cents a load to spread manure in the hayfields. They each had a team of horses to work with.
We only worked half a day at a time, then we went swimming or did something, really? Kids are.
When he got a little older, Bud ran a derrick cart to pick up hay and stack it in big hay piles with the assistance of the ranch crew. The boys also helped tend to the sheep in the mountains.
We had a range up at East Fork of Wood River, and we'd go up there and stay with a sheep herder maybe a week or so. When I was I think I was 11, we decided to climb Hyman one day, and we climbed Hyman Peak. So it was a pretty good way for a little kid to have fun.
Bud received his business degree from Washington State University in 1938.
There wasn't any jobs much. We were still in the Depression then. But Grandpa says, well, you go out to Peekaboo and I'll give you $60 a month in your room and board. Well, that sounded like a pretty good deal, so I come to Peekaboo. And I've been here ever since, really.
Bud was fortunate to have ties to the Kilpatrick family. The Kilpatrick Brothers Company had done well in the logging, mining, and railroad business across the United States, helping build the nation. The K-Bar-K Ranch had been established in Peekaboo by the Kilpatrick brothers in 1889, at the same time the company was working on building the Oregon Short Line Railroad from Shoshone to Ketchum. When Bud returned to Peekaboo after college, the K-Bar-K Ranch was focused primarily on raising sheep. They had 4 bands, or 8,000 sheep, and several hundred beef cattle. In the mid-1950s, Bud and his siblings bought the K-Bar-K Ranch. His sister and brother took the sheep operation, and Bud and his brother Bill decided to grow the cattle side of the business.
There was a big transition going on at the time, yeah. I just decided the cattle were the best deal, and it turned out that way.
Bud also acquired the Lava Lake Ranch, the Peekaboo store, and the feed grain elevator business. He named the business Peekaboo Livestock. By then, Bud was in love with the ranching lifestyle.
Once you get started with it and get in it, you're hooked. Every morning you get up and something's different. Turn out on the range and you're riding a horse every day. Even now, I go out there and make sure that the water's okay, check the fence and make sure the gates are closed, and it's just a constant, going out there and doing it. I was never a cowboy, but I've rode 1,000,000 miles, so.
Certainly part of the mystique had to be living on the banks of Silver Creek, a spring-fed, blue-ribbon trout stream that winds through the Purdy Ranch. Bud can go fishing or hunt ducks right outside of his back door. The local fishing and hunting was one reason Ernest Hemingway moved to Ketchum in 1959. He'd already been duck hunting with Bud on Silver Creek for years.
We were pretty good friends. Yeah, he really liked bird hunting. I just looked on old Hemingway as just another guy. I realized he was a pretty prominent sort of person, but still, he didn't throw his weight around. He's just another guy.
Hemingway was a good shot, too.
With a shotgun, he could outshoot all of us, really. We'd throw hand traps up once in a while and fool around, we'd always bet $1 on the deal, and he'd always take our money.
Bud and his wife Ruth socialized with Ernest and Mary Hemingway, and they skied together as well. Hemingway brought many celebrities out to the Purdy Ranch, including Gary Cooper, Jimmy Stewart, and Gregory Peck.
We met most of them, and they were all right. They had a few parties at Trail Creek we went to. I was busy, I was working, I couldn't party around.
The Hemingways were fond of Bud. They sent him several guns as gifts, and Hemingway signed his books.
My favorite is the Green Hills of Africa, which is about hunting in Kenya and I guess Tanzania probably too. To Ruth and Bud was best always love their friend and fellow shooter.
In the 1970s, Bud tried some new cattle grazing management techniques. He credits Gus Hormé, the father of rest rotation grazing, with educating ranchers about doing things right.
After you listen to that guy, you start realizing, hey, we got to start taking care of this land and the plants and the soil and the water. And then my son, when he came to work here in the 60s, he was really gung-ho on it, maybe more than I was. So we just started in and trying to make things a little better all the time.
Being located next to a world-class fishing stream made the Purdys sensitive to the impacts of cattle on stream banks. They provided off-site water for livestock to keep them out of the river. They also adopted rest rotation grazing systems on public lands. And Purdy says range tours helped with the education.
I got to give the agencies, and particularly the university, an extension credit for calling all this to our attention. Took 1 million tours everywhere. They're the best thing in the world to go out on a tour. See what someone else is doing.
In the 1990s, the Purdys took the next step in their conservation legacy and donated a 3,500-acre conservation easement to the Nature Conservancy. Bud's son, Nick Purdy, explains.
The easement is on the whole ranch, non-developable easement, can't subdivide. Essentially a 100-foot strip down each side of the creek that's restricted as to grazing and spraying and different practices, but I'm glad we did it. Our easement was a gift with no intention of ever receiving any money for it and with no tax advantage taken.
The easement has been valued at more than $7 million.
It's such a special piece of property. There's very little land like it anywhere because of Silver Creek. And I feel like we're just holding it for the generations and passing it on. And it isn't really ours. It's just too special to really belong to you. We're just kind of in charge of it, and hopefully it'll just go down the generations.
Nick Purdy says it's important for ranchers to have a strong conservation ethic.
I think you have to have that if you're going to stay in business. You got to protect the land and protect the water and make it better all the time. It's good business sense, but I think it just morally you got to do it too.
Education is important to Bud Purdy. He was one of the founders of the Idaho Rangeland Resource Commission, a state agency with a mission to educate urban dwellers about the importance of rangelands.
We do not want to see the loss of soil, and without nothing to hold that soil in your riparian area, your soil's going to run off, you're going to have pollution into your waters.
We need to get the word out to the younger people and in the schools and things like that, and a little more research about rangeland. Not particularly the cattle or the sheep, but the rangeland. It's unbelievable what it supports, the watershed, wildlife. The rangeland supports everything.
Bud Purdy also served in many leadership posts. He was chairman of the University of Idaho Foundation, president of the Idaho Cattle Association, and chairman of the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry, the state's most influential business lobby.
Bud really represented the cattlemen, the farmers, the people who used the land in Idaho, and he had a real sense of how you preserve it and how you keep it for the future.
When Purdy was chairman of IACI in 1982 to 83, he flew around Idaho with IACI president Pat Harwood to help recruit members. Another one of Purdy's talents is being a private pilot. He still flies his own plane, a Piper 235 Cherokee.
I fly it all the time.
flies like a dream.
Purdy's been flying since 1941, checking on his cattle, finding strays, flying to business meetings, and even flying with son Nick to Mexico to go dove hunting. The Purdys have a turbocharged Cessna 210 with a Rolls-Royce engine. Nick flies that plane.
There's something about flying, you like to fly. A bunch of sheep get lost. You get in an airplane, you can spot them real quick. I use it for recreation too, you know. We went to go to the backcountry. Hell, 50 years we flew into the root ranch and hunted elk.
Bud Purdy doesn't have any particular advice for living a long and full life.
One day at a time, about all you can do. I don't do anything special, you know. Well, I don't abuse myself too much. I'll take a drink, but I don't smoke. I'm careful.
Most of all, Bud believes that growing up on a ranch teaches kids to have a strong work ethic, just like it did for him.
You couldn't beat it, could you? No way. Nick's boys were raised on the ranch and they're really workers. Boy, those are the best kids you ever saw. Unbelievable. That's what it does. They don't learn to play, they learn to work.